It's 9:52 in the morning. Your debarkation window was 8:15. The hallway outside your cabin has gone quiet. No rolling suitcases, no families shuffling toward the gangway, no shipwide announcements nudging the final holdouts along. Just you, your cabin, and a decision you've made. You're not leaving. Maybe the cruise line did something that genuinely made you furious. Maybe you just love this ship and can't bring yourself to go. Maybe you've decided that staying put gives you some kind of leverage, a way to force a conversation on your terms. Whatever the reason, the door is closed, the do not disturb light is on, and you're waiting to see what happens next. Here's what happens next. Most people, if they've ever imagined this scenario, picture something like an uncomfortable checkout conversation. A guest services manager comes to the door, there's a tense back and forth, a supervisor gets called in, and eventually you either leave on your own terms or you don't. A hospitality standoff. Awkward and maybe embarrassing, but fundamentally a negotiation between you and the company that sold you a ticket. That assumption is wrong in almost every detail. The first person who knows you haven't left isn't security. It isn't guest services. It isn't anyone's job title sounds particularly authoritative. It's your cabin steward. They have a printed schedule for debarkation morning, a list of cabins and a timeline that begins the moment the lost passenger clears the gangway. Beds to strip, rooms to reset, everything turned over and ready before the next sailing's guests start boarding in a few hours. Your cabin is on that list, so when they come to your door and knock and the occupied light is still on well past the debarkation window, they don't stand there wondering what to do. They report it up. That report, from housekeeping, not from security, is what starts the formal sequence. The role you associated with chocolates on the pillow and precisely folded towel animals is, on debarkation morning, also a sensor, the first link in a chain that's about to move considerably faster than you expected. Guest services calls the cabin phone, then calls again. Then a representative walks the corridor personally, and that's when the situation shifts from administrative follow-up to documented incident. There's a record now, and everything that follows gets appended to it. This is also the moment the financial clock stops being abstract. The ship isn't sitting at berth while your checkout gets sorted. It's sitting at berth because debarkation is built into a tightly scheduled turnaround. In major U.S. home ports, the ship arrives at the terminal around dawn and doesn't depart again until late afternoon. That's a roughly 10-hour operation, and inside those 10 hours, the gap between the last passenger stepping off and the first new passenger stepping on is somewhere around 60 to 90 minutes. In that narrow window, thousands of cabins have to be cleared, cleaned, inspected, and restocked. Provisions come aboard, crew changes happen, port fees accumulate the entire time. Every unresolved cabin on the manifest is a small drag on a very large, very precisely timed machine. You are currently an unresolved cabin. Here is where most passengers, if they're still not moving, arrive at the obvious question. What are they actually going to do about it? Can they really make you leave? And this is the part most people genuinely don't know. At a U.S. home port, the cruise line is not the only party waiting for you. Customs and Border Protection must individually account for every passenger on that vessel before the ship can open for new boarding. Not most passengers, not the cooperative ones, every single one. CBP runs its own arrival manifest, completely independent of the cruise line, independent of your dispute with the hospitality company, and it cannot close out that manifest until you have physically cleared. The agent working that berth has your name on a list. Your name is still open, and CBP has independent federal authority to address that, authority that has nothing to do with whatever brought you to this cabin in the first place. What looked like a checkout disagreement is now a federal customs event. The cruise line's goal is to move you. The federal government's goal is to account for you. Neither of those goals has any interest in negotiating with you. Security arrives at the door, not to argue, to be present while the conversation happens and to document it. If that conversation goes nowhere, the next call doesn't go to a department head. It goes off the ship entirely. Port Authority, local law enforcement, they board. Most passengers watching the escalation reach this point hold on to some version of the same underlying assumption, that somewhere in this process there's a moment where their decision still matters, a final standoff, a leverage point, something that requires their consent. There isn't one. The cruise ticket you signed, the contract, the one embedded in the booking confirmation, specifies exactly when the voyage ends. Past that moment, you are a person on private property without authorization, because the authorization you purchased expired at debarkation. The captain, under maritime law, holds complete authority over every person aboard that vessel and can direct the removal of any one of them. Port authority executes that instruction. They don't need a particularly complex legal argument, they need the captain's authorization and a cabin number. Your cooperation is appreciated, it has never been required. "I just won't leave" was never a strategy, it was a countdown. The only thing you actually controlled was how many steps of escalation it took before it reached the end. Which is the moment most people start wondering, what if you genuinely can't leave? What if you hurt yourself on the last day, or you're sick enough that moving isn't realistic? Not defiance, just a medical reality. That route's completely differently. Legitimate medical situations go through the ship's medical center and trigger a separate protocol, a medical offloading sequence with its own choreography. But claiming illness once security is already at the door doesn't pause the non-compliance track. What it does is bring the medical team down to verify. If they verify it, the track changes. If they don't, the escalation continues exactly where it left off. The ship has seen this particular combination before. The two tracks exist separately for exactly this reason, and they're not designed to be confused with each other. Once you've accepted that you're leaving one way or another, the next question is usually about your belongings. Your things come with you, either in your hands or collected by cruise line staff and held portside. The ship doesn't keep your luggage, but by the time you're walking down the gangway with a port authority escort rather than a cheerful send-off from a guest services rep, the hospitality layer of the experience is entirely gone. You're dealing with port staff now, and the register is different. The luggage, it turns out, is the easy part. The harder consequence doesn't arrive dramatically. It arrives quietly, weeks or months later, the next time you try to book a cruise with that line. Cruise lines maintain internal guest conduct records, and a documented removal incident gets flagged, often across the entire corporate brand family, which, depending on which line you sailed, can close off a meaningful portion of the industry in a single entry. Not a notification, not a letter, just a booking that doesn't go through. Every step of the escalation the cruise line had to run was documented in real time. They weren't trying to punish you in the moment, they were building the file. Pull back from the whole scenario and one thing becomes clear. Almost none of this was improvised. Debarkation refusals are rare enough that most crew members finish a full contract without ever working one. But the protocol exists, is trained, and runs exactly as described because the ship cannot afford the alternative. The turnaround that makes all of this non-negotiable, the ship arriving at dawn, the 10-hour clock running, that 60 to 90-minute window between the last passenger off and the first new passenger on, is the same operational reality that makes the economics of modern cruising function at all. One passenger in one cabin on Deck 8 is a small wrench in a very large and very precisely scheduled machine. The machine has planned for the wrench. So, the next time you're on a cruise, debarkation morning, corridor filling up with rolling bags, PA announcements working through the final zones, and you notice a guest services representative moving with a pace that doesn't quite match the leisurely mood of everyone else around them, you'll know roughly what's behind that walk. Somewhere down the hall, a sequence is already running. It was always going to run. The question was only ever how many steps it would take. That brisk walk down the corridor isn't a checkout dispute. It's a countdown, already in progress, that nobody aboard has any interest in stopping. That's another one for the cruise files. If you want to learn more about what goes on behind the giant cruise ships, everything from the scams on board to the secrets below deck, subscribe, like, and share. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.